Hello everyone, this is Alex, and today we're looking at something very interesting indeed. We are looking at how a rhythmic ostinato can take your music from the beginning to the end of your cue and go through so many different emotions. It's like when you have a good ostinato, the music is already made, and you just have to think about how you orchestrate this from the beginning to the end. So the example I'm showing you today is something that I worked on as an orchestrator myself. Last year I worked with Antoine Rochette, which is a film composer, on this movie called Outstanding, directed by Mélanie Charbonneau. It's an amazing movie, a Canadian production that's actually out right now. So if you're in Canada, make sure you go check it out. And the music is quite interesting because it features really a blend between real orchestral instruments, 5 strings and 3 brass instruments, and on the other side, sound design. So there's a lot of sound design in this, and Antoine Rochette did a fantastic job in blending these two things. And my job for this was to take the instrumental part of the music and to bring it in the studio with real performers, write all the scores, all the dynamics, and even conduct the session in the studio. And it was 45 minutes of music, so quite a treat for the orchestral music lover that I am, and an amazing experience overall that I will share with you today. So the rhythmic ostinato is super important to fix at the beginning because it's what's going to bring you through all of your music, all of your cue, and it has to be flexible in a way. So what we'll see today is a 3-note ostinato, which is basically a G minor chord, but the fact is that the rhythmic that they use, which is da da di da 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 di da da da, this little thing here that's very subtle and not too suggestive, gives a lot of freedom for the rest of the music. So today we're going to listen to the different layers that we have in this music. We're going to mainly focus on the score itself and on the different parts that we wrote for the string instruments, but also the 3 solo brass instruments that we use for this. Now, before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to the channel, make sure you click and like this video, leave a comment down below, and I hope you can join us as a member on this channel if you want to support me and what I do here. All the details are down below, but now let's get into this rhythmic ostinato for the music of Outstanding. All right, so today we're going through this cue from the movie Outstanding. So the music from the movie Outstanding, Antoine Rochette, the composer, and yours truly as an arranger. I was called in for arranging some parts for strings on this to create this beautiful score. So we got a lot of music for this, about 45 minutes of music for the whole film. And there's strings everywhere, string parts everywhere. Of course, they are all supported by VST instruments. So, but the blend is very well done by the composer Antoine Rochette and our mixer also, which is Sylvain Lefebvre. And we got 5 strings for this and 3 brass instruments. So the brass instruments will come in a little bit later in the cue, but the whole cue is featuring strings and little parts here and there, and it's featuring an ostinato. So for those of you who don't know what an ostinato is a repeated figure which usually build a lot of tension through the music, through the development of the music. So this cue is about 2 minutes long, and you see that this ostinato is presented all the way through to the end. So starting a little bit later around here, measure 700. So we have weird bar numbers because they must align with the bars from the session on which the composer is putting the music. So this is about like 3/4 and upward in the movie, so quite advanced in the movie. And you can find the whole soundtrack for this on Spotify. You have here Outstanding, just write Antoine Rochette. Also make sure you find this, because I think that Outstanding is also another band name. I don't know this band, but it looks pretty cool. But yes, make sure you write the composer's name and you'll find all this beautiful music. So this is the track 13, Apartment. So let's have a listen first, and I'll show you the score at the same time on which the strings are, and we can discuss this afterwards. So right at the end, you hear this little part, a little softer part. This is from another cue. So you kind of did a little crossfade at the end here. So a pretty neat use of the ostinato in that case with the alto right in the middle. So you have this piccato line, and we chose the alto line here, the viola, sorry, to do this. And you might think, well, might it be stronger with violin? It could be, yes, because we have D, B flat, and G. The G is the lowest string of the violins, and we didn't want an open string for this. You see there's a difference with the open strings, and if you keep the same note but pressed on another string. And we have this possibility with the viola to have this maybe more constant kind of sound, maybe darker kind of sound that we still have with what we have before. So I just want to keep that in line. And also this opened up some possibilities for me in the first and second violins to have this second minor second tremolo or group of 16 notes that come in and come out. So I thought this would be a good way to make use of my violins this way and to keep my ostinato on the middle line. You can hear at the end the ostinato get grouped up with a second string. So it's doubled up on the octave, on the lowest octave, to create an even darker representation of it through the end. It makes us feel like something's starting, something's hopeful at the beginning, and then in the end of this music, it feels a little bit darker. So it's a good way to make a theme or a thematic develop through a whole cue of music. This kind of idea to change your gesture or to add a darker gesture below. You still feel the alto line, the viola line. That's important here. Like if we just listen to this. You still hear the viola very importantly, and we can maybe listen to only the viola here, as opposed to. So this really creates a kind of changing transition, but when you listen to the full cue from the beginning to the end, you don't realize this. It's just a doubling of the same line. It's like you had a layer of shadow behind what was originally there, but it still creates this much darker sound when you come to this part, transitioning to the rest of the music. So in the strings, what other interesting things we have? The double bass doing this dun 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 dun. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty cool. It's very much in the background if you listen here. And the double bass it's such a sluggy instrument, especially if you do this little punctuation. It's the instrument that's the hardest to play exactly in tune, but it's also the one that disturbs the less in a way, especially when you do these little punctuations, dun 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 dun. Because when you attack the note with the bow, these strings are so big, it's very easy for them to react. They're much more inclined to bend. So this always creates this very big tension on these short notes, because the attack is much faster. Even if they can play very soft in that way, the pitch will be a little bit uncertain, and this is what we were looking for here. We didn't want to use autotune too much for this, just to create this sense of tension between this D and this other D, which is actually this is 2 octaves above. And then we got this G that's coming out of nowhere. This is actually a 4th above this line here, because this line is actually an octave lower. So a very dissonant interval. It's not a dissonant interval of fourths, that is, but in that register, it can really sound like it. Just because it's very close, it makes this very muddy sound. And also the fact that we have this very fast attacking notes here, short notes, really creates this ambiguity. We can almost hear like an E flat here sometimes. So it's kind of ambiguous if it's really a major third or fourth here. But the fact that we have this voicing very low and this I C all up above, if you know a little bit about chord voicing and some videos that I present about chord voicing, I always say leave space between the upper lines and the bass line if you want something more balanced. And here we did the opposite. We leave more space between these two lines and less space between these two lines. So this creates a very like disbalanced kind of effect, which is what we were looking for. So rules and voicing and chord voicing is, there are rules, but if you break these rules, you might create another effect that might benefit the movie in that case, where we wanted to create something very discomforting. And actually, I do think there's some sound effect in here that play the E flat. Yeah, that's right. This one is playing the E flat, and that's doing a lot of dissonance with this one. So playing with these extra layers of harmony when you're working with sound design is also a consideration when you're doing your score. And in this case, the composer all worked, of course, in the DAW, and I had to do the scores afterwards. But it's always something I have to take in consideration. Also, making sure these dissonance in the sound between the sound design and the string parts are still there. So what else? I think that what's interesting here, especially, is the difference between the less rhythmic element and the more rhythmic element. So we got tremolos, like this is really a tremolo, non-measure tremolo. This is what we got at the beginning around here. And so this one is really like out in the air. We don't quite know where we are, this part here. And when it comes back here, a few measures later, it's really like a different effects. It's like the clock ticking suddenly. So this introduction, it really goes back and forth between this. There's also a few other cues that we did in this movie that really goes between these two. And it really shows the uncertainty of the character in her position in the movie. It's really subtle decisions, but it really creates a lot of impact in the music. And you see this is very simple music. It's just like there's 3 notes in here and there's a 4th note here. Sometimes, especially when you're classically trained, you think about harmony and then changing harmony and then doing chord progressions that work and then trying to, make the discourse go forward. But in film music, in film scoring, sometimes having this approach of like a lot of themes, a lot of melodies, a lot of harmony, it can really distract us from the movie itself and from the action, from the how we would like the music to be is more of something in the background and something supporting the movie instead of like adding another meaning. They must feel connected. And nowadays the music and movies really have this tendency to be connected. And we need to be careful of that, and we need to be aware of that as composers, because before, sometimes the music will feel disconnected. Of course, like if something's happened in the movie, the music will follow it. But the thing is, like, if you think about Star Wars, like, it's a symphony orchestra. There's no symphony orchestra in space, you know, and in science fiction. And this is something actually Hans Zimmer said when he composed the music for the film Dune. Well, it doesn't make sense to have the orchestra in this environment. So in that case, for the more action part, we were looking for something more repetitive, metronomic, to recreate this kind of military training and like routine, and like kind of epic sound and marching band kind of thing. So this is where we went with this. But yeah, just on a little side note, what you need in music nowadays is very much different than what you needed before. So very simple yet very efficient. But we do decide very carefully what note to bring in and what effect to bring in. Like here we got a sul tasto and a sul tasto on an harmonic. So this is actually the harmonic from the open D string. So if you do, if you lightly press an octave above on the D string, and you also play sul tasto, you get this kind of effect that I'll make you hear around here. You hear this kind of very brilliant sound, and with no vibrato. It's a lot more like dangerous kind of sound, a lot more unpredictable, and it creates a sense of danger and uncertainty that we liked here. Otherwise, this tremolo of seconds, minor second, is super useful. It's very, very simple, very subtle, but it creates a lot of tension everywhere. And if you play it soft like this, it would feel less dissonant. So Ordinario as well, we didn't want to keep the sul tasto, so a little bit more focused in that regard. Note that we also have our double bass here, that's also playing these notes, very, very, very soft and delicate. And once we come here at 729, so you see I added in a 6/4. So let's just talk about meters in film scoring just a little bit. You need to align the different moments with the screen. So this moment here, I don't remember exactly what it was in the movie, but it's a decisive moment when we need to shift the gear, when you need to go into action mode, something strong and forte. So this is where the horns are coming in, the brass instruments, sorry. So here we just needed this little motif to be repeated a couple times, just actually this one time more. So we created a 6/4 here. You really want your first downbeat to come in on this event. You know, something we could have done, and something a lot of my students do, is they just leave everything in 4/4, and then they, instead of this here, they would have like a bar 4/4 here, and then this would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And so this event will come in on the third beat, which doesn't make any sense musically. It's very important that the score is very, very musical for the performers in the studio. So that's super, super important. And you're gonna see like more complex things. Like last week, we recorded some brass, and also with Antoine actually, and we recorded some brass, and there was like a 3/8, and then like a 5/16 or something weird like that, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and ping, and then we come in at this time. So you want to put these weird time signatures before the music actually comes in, so that the new thing always come on the first downbeat. So in this case, it's just a 6/4. It's not crazy at all, but it's just a little remark for your own studio sessions if you do ever plan to do any. So now this is where the action comes in. We got this the cello who are doing which are super strong and super efficient for this. It's really the middle register for the cellos, but suddenly also our double bass starts doing these long notes, which are very powerful. Double bass in film scoring is a necessity, and they sound super well in a cinema with the amazing speakers and sound that you can get there. So this is such a strong moments when you hear this and actually in the movie in the cinema. And then we got our brass instrument that are starting to come in with long notes. So what you hear in the soundtrack is actually a blend between these three musicians that we recorded, and you can hear also some crescendo, diminuendos here and there. We asked them to be a little bit free with that, but we also added some other VST to double them. So let's have a listen to just this part. So we hear the strings a little bit in the front. So this is really my 5 strings that I recorded here. If you listen to the brass, these are the brass. The most of the things you hear here are actually really the sound of the instruments, but they're double and they're put in like a big reverb, and the sound is treated. And I think, yeah, these are, they're really in the front, and they're just backed up by other stuff. So it's amazing what you can do nowadays with only a few musicians, and just finding the right blend with other VSTs to double them, putting them in a great reverb. You can really have this sense of epicness and huge sound that we can hear in the original soundtrack. And you see that these are staggered. So these are only actually the trombones doing these low lines with the double bass here, and we got the horns who's actually sometimes taking pauses. So pauses are important in brass instrument and wind instrument in general, just to give them a time to breathe. Give the ear time to breathe also, in a way, because you don't want to create something too constant. And in that case, we wanted to like swells of brass coming in and coming out. So really the trumpet and the horns are exchanging notes. The fact that they're playing quite closely, this is a minor third, this is a sixth, and then here a third. So they're playing like this kind of, so they're playing kind of these different relation of intervals, presenting different intervals of the music. And sometimes a little bit before the downbeat, the trumpets coming before. So creating this very alive sound, instead of just like putting 2 bars, 1 chord, 2 bars, 1 chord, 2 bars, 1 chord. So this is something I really encourage you to explore, especially working with scores in general. I have some students, they really tend to like try to respect as much as possible the division, or they really get influenced by the divisions of these lines. But actually this is irrelevant. Actually, I always think, forget about the lines in general, forget about them. Of course, they help you structure your chords, but they should be invisible, because sound doesn't include this. It just, the note, is it long or is it short? It can be longer, it can be this length, it can be whatever, but so yeah, just think about that, and staggering these entries of the brass instrument is actually a very powerful effect to use. So this motif gets a little bit more intense afterwards. This is where we actually start the doubling of the cello an octave below, and this part here that was lower, I send it here, and then that's another part here that actually pairs with this. So if you see and then they're actually the same length, so they're really complementary here. So sometimes when you're thinking about how can I create more layers in my ostinato, well, think of this. Here, the composer created a new rhythmic, and then this new rhythmic gave him the idea of this thing here. So this is together, this is together, this is together. We don't have much layers here. Actually, it's all part of the same kind of sound, and just a little bit like Rhythmic 1 and Rhythmic 2 here to create some dynamism. And within the Rhythmic 1 here, there's like little 1 and little 2, the different layers here, but it's really simple, and all comes from the same different patterns. So we got this until the end. It's pretty intense, and it ends up with diminuendo. What's beautiful with the strings that you can have as long of notes as you want. So that's why we use so many strings in film scoring in general, and why when you're writing for the orchestra, the strings are very more present in general, because they can last a lot longer than other instruments, than the woodwinds and the brass instruments. But yeah, this was a cue that we had today. Don't forget to check out Antoine's full soundtrack for this. I put the link down below. We put a lot of work into this, and it's an amazing soundtrack from the beginning to the end. So make sure you check it out. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.